Thank you.
So I'm going to call the select board meeting to order on April 2023 at 3:33 p.m. This is a one agenda meeting where we are going to meet Mr. Kunda and talk about the DPW superintendent position. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
So just relax. We are an easy group. So there's four of us. One of us cannot be here because she's got a conflict. So it's going to be both this select board. So
Sure.
5 members select board. Here's 4 of the 5. So we'll be making the decision as well. You will. So we're just going to ask some questions, right?
That's
You
fine.
Feel free. So why don't you start off with letting us know what we've got your resume. So we know it's there, but let us know what else you might want us to know about you before we get going to questions.
What else?
Yeah.
Your typical engineer, as you might expect, like technical things. Although I gotta say, you know, sometimes engineers get painted with a black and white type picture. I'm flexible when it comes to that sort of thing, so I wouldn't say I'm very rigid when it comes to black and white decisions. I've got a lot of background with computers. I do enjoy the technical things with computers, database programming, that sort of thing. And I try to use that to my advantage with my work. And really, I don't know what else to say, but
That's fine. Your resume was great, very detailed, so we've got a whole lot of information by just reading that. Okay, so that's fine, that's fine. And you give another chance to say anything else you want to clarify anything, wrap it up. So we'll have another chance.
sure,
Okay.
great.
All right, let's get started here. So I'm going to start at this end and go this way. So Andrew.
Good afternoon. Mr. Kunda, could you share some instances that demonstrate your capability to regularly develop and implement plans for new projects and redirect activity on plans that aren't working?
So what I like to do typically is get all the decision makers on a particular project involved early on so we can collect input from them. Whether, I know you don't have sewer, but typically it'd be highway, water, sewer, wastewater, transfer station if it's applicable to them, town hall staff. Sometimes we get into situations where it involves financing and whatnot, so we'll have the accounting office present, but basically communicate early on as possible on a project, solicit input, and after we get staff level input, we usually reach out to the public if it's warranted. If the project's high profile, we'll get solicit input from the public and take input from the public. After all, we work for them, so I recognize that and try to consider all of that. If we have a project that's headed down the wrong path, it really depends what level you're at. If you've got finances already involved and headed in a particular direction, really it becomes a board level decision on how you want to steer things. If decisions were made on a particular project and you're going down a path, I don't pretend to think I know it all, but I like to leave the decision makers left to make their own decisions. Well, myself, I recommend and advise. That's not to say I'm not capable of making decisions. I certainly am. It's just in the flavor of the question that you asked, I want to make it clear that I'm open to public input on projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kathy, do you mind? I know I've asked the first question. I have a quick follow-up question that I think will hold.
Go right ahead.
Okay, which is, if you could explain, sir, your current position as a utilities and facilities department superintendent in Spencer, that's a little different than we have in Southborough. So what you were referring to there with like highway and water transfers, those are separate departments in Spencer, and you are in charge of coordinating them?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, we have a separate office called Utilities and Facilities, and it pretty much manages the transfer station, the highway department, the water department, buildings and grounds. Sewer is separate, so we have a separate commission that's not under Utilities and Facilities. So from that aspect, the roles and duties are very similar to what Southborough would have. The budgets are all separated and, defensible, but I'm there to represent all the departments and the budgets for those departments.
all right, thank you.
Does that mean I get two questions also?
Whatever you want to say, go ahead.
All right.
Interested in your thoughts about roadway maintenance, pavement management systems, stormwater issues. As you may know, the timing is interesting here because we have contracted some months ago with a beta group to come in and do an assessment of our pavement condition. And they have just recently finished that initial assessment, and we're headed into conversations with them about recommendations out of that process. So have you used those kind of systems previously? Have you worked with beta, for example?
Yeah.
And how do you manage the decision process out of that, where you've got multi-million-dollar worth of work backlog there that we want to do, but we have very limited budget to do it. So how does that all work out?
Sure. So we had Stantec that developed the pavement management plan in Spencer back in around 2018. We're due to have our roads surveyed again. I was actually exploring StreetLogix to actually have that in-house and have a little more control and versatility over the development of.
Talk to all of them and others too.
Yeah, they look like, not to give them a plug, but I think they look like a decent outfit. What I've found the problem with having a periodic exercise done by an outside engineering firm is you get a snapshot in time and it's not a live thing. So every 3 to 5 years, you do that exercise again, and then, you re-rank and reprioritize. The StreetLogix approach or similar allows you to collect the data annually and then manage the priorities and budgets annually, which I found a good approach. That's not to say Beta is not qualified. Certainly, I've spoken to the folks in Beta team about that when in Douglas, when we were looking at pavement management program. And coincidentally in Douglas, we also went with Stantec at the time. But I'm very familiar with the approach and implementing recommendations. Certainly, usually the first year after one of these reports, you'll probably want to go to town meeting and get funding to implement the plan. And more than likely, there might be an annual aspect to that where the ongoing maintenance might be above what you get allocated for Chapter 90 funds. So, you may want to, and again, it depends what Beta ends up saying. I have driven around town and there are some roads that need some work. And it's bigger than potholes. There's some degradation on some of the roads. But all part of what I think is a fiscally responsible approach to maintaining the roads. Once you get the roads to a certain standard, the idea is you spend less overall in the long run. Than playing catch up to fill potholes and do major reconstruction projects.
Preventative maintenance.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the Southborough DPW has limited staff, resources, et cetera. What's your philosophy about cooperation with other town departments requesting DPW assistance, given the limited staffing?
That's going to largely depend on the staff and if they have a union contract and what their job descriptions are. I support it. I mean, I'm a big advocate for working together and, you know, if the school department needs a little assistance, then no big deal. If it's a different department, no big deal. If we've got the ability to handle it, and I understand the mechanic does the oil changes for all the vehicles, you know, so I think the staff is willing to work with different departments. And, you know, I'm probably going to be the biggest advocate for the staff, but on the same token, I'm going to make sure they do what they need to do.
All right, great, thank you.
Sure.
So given your long tenure in Douglas as the engineer, county engineer, right?
Sure, yeah.
So we haven't had a town engineer on staff for, I forget how long, but for quite a
10
while.
years or
10
so.
years.
Yeah.
We did have, and Southport hasn't grown that much in those 10 years, so, you know, we're a town of 10,000. Do you have an opinion on what the right size of town is to have our own staff engineer versus what we do now, which is contract out with a professional engineering firm? It's a debate that's going around right now, so we're trying to figure that piece of it out.
Isn't Karina an engineer?
She is, yeah.
Yeah.
But now she's on the, okay, so she is, but she's not part of the DPW. She's on the, she's.
No,
on the
understood.
planning board, so yeah,
Understood.
she is.
Yeah.
But, you know, so she's not doing the kind of work that you probably did at Douglas, you know, when you were inside.
Sure.
So we're talking about someone who really worked for the DPW 10 years ago. And was an engineer, professional engineer, and then that person left and we never rehired the person. Since then, we have contracted out for the engineering work that the DPW has had to.
It really depends on the workload, to be honest with you. For example, in Spencer, I am spread very thin, so I couldn't even imagine spending time designing things to that end.
And you don't have an engineer in Spencer right now?
We don't.
Okay, so you contract out too?
We do. And, you know, so it becomes you know, there's a role for an engineer scoping out projects and managing engineers and making sure they're doing what they said they were going to do within their scope. So contract management is a big part of engineering. I may not be designing or stamping plans, but managing those contractors still requires the knowledge and the skill set to make sure you're getting what you pay for. The other question I might have is, do you have the tools that an engineer needs, whether it's survey instruments or AutoCAD? I assume you have GIS in-house, but
We do have GIS. I don't know about updated AutoCAD. So I don't know, because we haven't had someone here in years, so I don't know.
I can use those things. Okay, so I have the ability to use them. I'm willing to use them. It really boils down to time management. And if the time allows, you know, us to do that in-house versus sending it out.
Right, Nancy, back to you.
Using an example with a union, contractor, a vendor, or a citizen, can you please describe the most challenging negotiation you have conducted? What was so challenging about it? And which of your negotiating techniques was the most effective?
Well, I haven't participated in a union negotiation. Douglas was non-union and Spencer is union, but the town administrator handles that. He solicits feedback and opinions from me between the negotiations. But with regard to contractors, if you have it boils down to your scope of services and whether or not it's sufficient. If you find you're in a situation where you're expanding the scope or you get a change order, you negotiate a fair price. If you can't do that, then maybe you negotiate the ability to go out for the services. We have a situation in Spencer now where we've identified some sewer work that wasn't part of the original project that we are currently working with the contractor in negotiating. Luckily, they've been very good to work with. In Douglas, I actually had issue with an OPM and you know, we were withholding payment to the OPM for a period of time that we didn't feel they were representing the town very well. So long story short, we did have upper management come to town and we sat down and reviewed the issues we were having. And, you know, it was a formal process, but we thought it was productive and we did end up saving the town some money in the long run. in that case, we were withholding payments.
Mhm.
Okay, because we didn't feel like we were getting paid, we were paying for what we were getting for, so. You know, that was a little more complicated than a change order on a construction project. So,
Thank you.
Customer service question. How would your current employer and citizens rate your customer service that you provide, both internal and external? And what have you done to go beyond the traditional norm in this area to reach out to the public? We have a number of citizens, as many towns do, who have specific requests at DPW, and DPW superintendent winds up having to sort that out. Tell some people that, sorry, we can't get to what you want
Sure.
to for a variety of reasons. So how do you sort that out? And what kind of job would you rate yourself as having
right,
in that area?
so I don't know how it was historically in Southborough, but in Spencer, when I came there, I found, and I heard this a lot on the phone, was people were thrilled that they were getting called back.
Very low bar.
That was a low bar, so, you know, but what I found throughout my career is, as long as you're genuine and forthright and can have a conversation with the people, you'll do okay with them. As long as they recognize that you're listening to what they have to say, and you're forthright with whether or not you can do it. And as long as you can give them a reason as to why you may not be able to do something, I find that goes a long way. You're never going to please everybody all of the time. And, you know, particularly when you're in the public sector, it's a little difficult to please everybody. You have people that are at odds often, but like I say, if it comes down to a situation that I have to bring in others, whether it's a town administrator or the board, for example, to make a decision, I have no problem doing that. But, you know, I find honesty and openness, transparency with the public goes a long way.
Have you used things like newsletters to update the public?
No, we've had projects where we've done, you know, mailings where we didn't have to. We've had public meetings to explain projects. But no, haven't done a newsletter, or, you know, I know social media is a big thing now. I haven't really done that too much because it's a double-edged sword. I found I'm happy to do it. It's not been required in my previous jobs. But, you know, my concern would be, you know, the comment section or feedback in that open forum. When discretion sometimes helps.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you describe a situation where you made an important decision that you knew regardless of what you decided, it would be controversial? And can you explain how you arrived at that decision and what you did to present it, and how did you deal with the controversy around it?
So we have a $9.5 million TIF project going on in Spencer right now that has a bikeway. And I understand you had a project recently with a bikeway. You know, that's great for people that don't live on the route. The people that live on the route usually have an objection with the you know, new bikeway and higher pedestrian traffic that it might invite. So while it's a good thing, there's both sets of people that might not appreciate that or appreciate it depending on what it is. And again, I go back to the people in Spencer have been great along this route to work with. And I believe it's because of the communication. If they were caught blindsided or didn't know this was coming down the pike, you might have more of an issue. The right-of-way taking process has been crazy too. I don't know if you had to go through that, but it's very meticulous and, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just last week or the week before taught an 8th grade civics class at the middle school here, and their work, they have to do a civics project in 8th grade, and they wanted to pursue doing bike lanes here. And I was like, so let's talk about sidewalks and see how we can do with that, because there's so many challenges, not, you know, with sidewalks, but then bike lanes on top of that.
Right.
makes it even more complicated. So, right of way was a big, conversation with the whiteboard. And all that.
Oh, yeah.
So, so in that project, were you the one presenting in the public meetings?
Yes.
Or, okay, and you had public forums
Yes,
to communicate that to residents?
yes. In fact,
Okay.
tonight later, we're gonna have one too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, Spencer is town administrator or town manager?
Town administrator,
So do you report directly to the town administrator?
I do, and the water commissioners, so it's a split.
Do you have any sounding board, any committee that you can rely on to run things by, or is it straight to town administrator and straight to water commission?
Straight to town administrator and straight to water commission, and I usually include the town administrator on almost all of these things, just because he should know.
So to kind of pick up on what Chelsea was saying, the reason she's mentioning sidewalks is we are embarking on a program to really try to expand the amount of sidewalks in South Florida there. If you had to pick one issue where there was pretty much general consensus in the town, it'd be we need more sidewalks. So we've got, have you heard of the term ARPA?
Yes.
Okay, so all towns got so much money. So our committee, we put together to basically recommend to the select board how to use that money based on feedback from the town.
Yep.
The biggest chunk of that was recommended for new sidewalks. So we've got a very robust permanent capital committee, it's called CIPC. And we've gone ahead and charged them with this program because we didn't have a DPW superintendent. So the new DPW will be part of that program to truly try to see how much we can expand as far as sidewalks go. So
Sure.
that would be one of the jobs. Another thing too, you mentioned, I'm gonna go back. Can I do two questions? Okay, so, okay, so, a few minutes ago, you kind of alluded to something we've thought about too, which is just issuing a bond for X amount of dollars that hopefully will cover all what we need to do with roads instead of waiting every year till we get our chapter 90 in our local warrant each year and just spending what we have each year, kind of pay as you go. So we've actually thought about that. So that's something I think we'll bring up again to see if that really would be the better way to do. So we really can keep our roads in the shape that people want. And
Sure.
to be. So
The only thing I would caution you on it with regard to that is when engineers prepare their estimate, they'll do it in 2023 dollars. And as time goes on, if it's a multi-year implementation like Spencer had, you're not going to get all those roads. And there are other costs that are not anticipated, even though that, engineer, whether it's Beta or Stantec or whatever, whichever engineer, they're not going to think of things like right of way, for example, that need to get paid for. So just bear that in mind.
good point.
Yeah.
So you mean costs go up over time?
I am telling you that. Yeah. So when you draft the warrant, you want to make sure that the language is reflective of a variable scope. This is what we're targeting to do over time value of money. Hopefully we get to do all of it, but I caution you on that you'll do all of it.
90% would be good. So
Yeah.
Andrew?
Could you please illustrate a complex task or project during your tenure and looking back at this project, now knowing the results, what, if anything, did you learn from this experience? And what would you do differently if you had the opportunity to do it again in the future?
I'm going through something in Spencer. We've got a filtration plant. It was started off being a very straightforward and simple process where we just wanted to replace the filter media, but it's kind of expanding in scope because there are some pinhole leaks that we've noticed that are in the tanks and some of the piping in the filtration room. So we're actually looking at probably replacing all of the filter media tanks. That's going to end up resulting in probably implementation of a new fee schedule after we get the estimate from the engineer. And the users are not going to appreciate that. Is there anything different that I would do in terms of the approach or resolution on that? I can't think of anything. It's one of these things that you encounter an issue, you explore it, and you find out instead of just this little thing, it's a much larger thing. And, you know, communication to the users, you're not going to be happy, I'll tell you, because sewer's gone up recently. So, you know, it's going to be a tough thing for them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question about experience with preparing bid specification and purchasing supplies. I mean, it sounds like there's plenty going on in Spencer, so that's a fairly significant part of what you do.
Friday mornings. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
What's the biggest project you've handled? Roughly.
We've put out bid documents recently for a Pleasant Street Smithville Road construction project that was $2.5 million. Working, although I didn't do the bid documents for this, it's kind of a state tip project. We got the $9.5 million Meadow Road project. We also have a Route 9 project that's ongoing.
Do you and your staff actually typically prepare the bid documents? For
I do,
smaller
yes,
projects?
yes. The format that we've had was not consistent with what town council recommends, so I've been rewriting the entire thing, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can you give an example in your experience of administering a budget or financial experience like a capital plan? And how did you determine goals and objectives for your budget?
Coming into some of these positions, Douglas, I had a relatively small budget, so I'm going to focus primarily on Spencer. We have about a $2 million operating budget. Really, you look at the past and was that sufficient to get us through where, you know, versus, so what they budgeted, what they've spent, and then looking forward, is that consistent with what you need? And then taking those things into account and to develop your budget. Once you break it into smaller pieces, it's not that complicated. It's time consuming. As long as you do your homework and you get quotes or, you know, talk to vendors that are appropriate, then the budget process is actually fairly simple. What was the second part of your question?
Do you have any capital?
Yes, I'll give you a good example in Spencer. We have a salt shed that we want to build. Initially, before I got there, they had specified a timber salt shed. And, you know, pre-COVID costs, they were looking at an initial construction cost of, I want to say, $800,000. COVID hit. Supplies and materials have gone up. Now that scenario has gone up to almost 2 million, like 1.9 million, for that same salt shed. And so I've been working with the capital, been in front of them 2 times. The first time was to get the balance of funding for the timber shed. They didn't fund that, and they said, you know, considered looking at a fabric shed. So I went back into the drawing board and demonstrated through a life cycle cost analysis that, in fact, the timber shed was less costly than the fabric shed. And they still didn't go for it because of the initial capital cost, which is fine. And I respect boards, you know, their decision-making ability. So long story short, we ended up putting in for a fabric shed this year, which was, you know, less capacity. And I want to say it was around 800,000, which was the original mark that we were trying to hit. And they chose not to fund that too. So.
And this is your capital committee.
This is the capital committee
So
currently.
it didn't even make it to town meeting.
Didn't even make it to town meeting. The town meeting's in May, but yeah,
Okay.
it's not going to make it. You know, and the sad part is, you know, they have a current area that they keep it that's covered that only holds 300 tons, and they need 3,000 tons for the season, you know, so it's constant ordering and keeping on top of the ordering of the salt to really make that effective.
And prices fluctuate, so you.
Well, we're in a collaborative, so that's not the issue. It's actually getting the deliveries that becomes the issue. Yeah,
So will you bring it back again next year?
we would, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a safety issue.
Well, okay,
It's a safety
Okay.
issue. Yeah,
general you.
yeah, right.
And at town meeting, do you present your capital items if questioned or?
Yes, any articles. So
Okay.
whether it's water outside the capital process or capital items for construction project, yes,
And is your water an enterprise fund?
yes.
Okay. You have a lot of experience with that.
Several years.
Okay. We just went 5 years ago.
Not that much. Maybe
Four.
3.
Enterprise, yeah, it's been about 3, it's been special
Okay.
revenue fund prior to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, that's the questions.
So we have a very lean, mean, capable staff. DPW. A lot of them have been there for a long time, and they worked with the most recent DPW supervisor. Yes, a picture of them is sitting right behind you. It's true. So given that they are very used to one person style, that may be the only supervisor that they've had, because she's here for a long time. How would you start your first day? What would you do the first day you're here?
Get to know them and rely on them. I really look to them to educate me on what the town does. You know, I don't pretend to know internal processes. And so, you know the ladies in the front office are essential to the operation. I know the ops and the crew, they all know what they're doing, and they've been doing it for years. As you point out, they've been here forever. And I think that says a lot about the town. And so I would look to them for input on, how do you think this should get done? If it involves them and pertains to them, absolutely look for their input on how to proceed. That's not to say I will always take it, but I appreciate the input.
Andrew?
Could you tell us about a particular kind of environmental issue that you're interested in, or some ideas you have from if you were the new DPW superintendent about best practices you could implement, but so the town would be a leader in sustainability and sound environmental practices?
That's a tough question. A leader in sustainability and environmental practices. I'm not sure if our buildings have solar, perhaps, if we have net metering, maybe. I don't know, but those are low-hanging fruit, I would say, to work towards achieving some of these things. Are you a green community?
Yes.
Yeah. And is that handled through the planning office?
Facilities.
Facilities, so that would be under here. Okay, so I have tremendous amount of experience with the Green Communities program, and this building, I'm sure, meets all the standards, but some of the other buildings may not. And implementing, going for the competitive grants now, I think would be important for us to look at. There's other programs too that we could implement, whether they're the MVP program and, to the environmental end, so that we could get funds to, work on physical infrastructure improvements. I don't know if many town departments have vehicles, but I know in police department, we installed some idle masters that manage idling of vehicles. So there's things to do. It's just, I need to know more about the dynamic of the town in order to make some recommendations, but there's plenty of things to do. I don't know if that will get us to be a leader.
That's right.
It's a long trip for us to be a leader.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Following up on Kathy's question about first day on the job, if you extend that over the first 6 months or so, generally, how would you envision sort of getting up to speed in this process? How did that work for you to do this job?
Yeah, for the existing projects and the ongoing projects, it's a matter of looking at the back history and what happened, how we got to where we're at, and then being able to move forward from there. So that's going to take some time depending on the number of projects you had going on. But it's, as I said during my prior meetings, it's really how familiar you become with the work. So the comfort level comes with learning about these things and dealing with them. In terms of working here 6 months and having a experience and background, hopefully by then I'll have a good working relationship with the staff, and they're going to be a big part of anyone in this position's success, not just mine. And, you know, I can't imagine a situation where you're working in a place and you're not getting along with the staff. I don't know if that answers your question. It's really, I guess what I'm saying is I would rely on my staff a lot and myself from the aspect of learning about the different projects that we
I
have
guess what
going.
I'm trying to drive at, is there a process or structure or prioritization that you think about? These are the 3 or 4 things that are most important. Like, do I look at the biggest projects first, or is there a list of, you know, problem projects that I'm
Usually, yes, I get you. Yeah, usually it's when you're starting out and you don't get your bearings, it's putting out the fires and trying to figure out where the fires are and then doing the best you can. If there are timelines, I'm not sure if Southborough's got that many projects going on.
Fair number.
Yeah. But I find because of the magnitude of projects I have in Spencer, that's kind of the mode you end up in. You can put in as many hours as you can, weekends and nights, and you're still looking at the next due deliverable and you're meeting that timeline. So it's kind of like always doing that. But and that goes to your point about doing in-house engineering. If there's not time available, that's what you end up doing. If there is time available, if you have adequate staff and you can focus on managing the schedule to that exact precise thing, then that's great. I've never had that luxury. Yeah.
May not hear either, actually, but
Yeah, right.
it's a good goal. Thank you.
So assembling and maintaining productive teams is important. Describe a situation that demonstrates your ability to build a cohesive, productive team. You've talked a lot about managing down, so maybe if you could talk about, you know, your peers and managing up, that might be helpful.
I think, again, getting to know individuals is what really makes a team work, and what their needs are, and doing what you can to work with them to meet those needs. And that goes from both above and below. And I think it's fairly straightforward process. You know, you work with people and you try to, I mean, you're there most of your life, so why wouldn't you work with them and get to know them and
Right.
that sort of thing.
Do you currently have department head meetings that you're
We do
involved with?
Yeah.
And-
twice a month,
Okay.
and we work well together, all of us. And
So I want to go back and, to Andrew's question, be a little bit more specific. So we've got a transfer station too, very popular.
I saw it, it's great,
Yeah, it's used for a lot more than just taking your trash and people campaign and
of
they
course.
promote causes, et cetera. So it's pretty popular. We've got a very, pretty robust recycling center. The last couple years, it appears that the cost of recycling in some cases has exceeded the cost of regular trash because plastic problem with China, et cetera. So do you know what there is to know about recycling? Are you at the, forefront of at least understanding how we can recycle the most that you possibly can and do it the right way?
Well, I think you've got a big head start from a lot of communities where you separate at the source. And so you get the biggest bang for your buck for that. But I would rely on working with vendors as to, what we can do to improve the operation. Do I know more than what you're currently doing? No, I think it's, I think you have a phenomenal operation up there, and I think it's actually a good model for other towns to look to. But in terms of improving the current operation, I'd talk to the vendors that we currently use. See, what-
Recycling is important for this town.
Right.
I mean, we want to do what we can in this plastic issue. I just don't know if there's a change within the budget. So I just want to make sure that you know what there is to know as far as how to do this. So we do as much as we possibly can, encourage people to do this.
Right.
Andrew?
What skill would you most like to improve?
Skill. I would probably like to not be so technical. I don't know. So I guess a little more, and I guess it goes down to, you know, what your comfort level is. But, you know, that skill I'd like to improve. You got me on that one. I'm not gonna fake it through it.
Okay.
Okay. Going off from my previous question about what are you going to do in your first 6 months or so, how do you approach the issue of looking farther out ahead and more vision kind of thing to say, here's a problem that's coming down the road, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, et cetera. How do you stay alert to that? What process do you anticipate using to make sure that we don't get caught by surprise with various things like that? And can you give an example of something like that, that 5 years in advance you said there's going to be a problem, let's get out ahead of it and plan, and actually got in a position where you're able to deal with that effectively?
Sure. So it comes back to knowledge about the town. And when you say a problem, I always think to, you know, infrastructure, traffic, that sort of thing, and trying to flag something before it becomes a problem. A lot of that comes from the public feedback, because we can't be out there all the time and know the nuances that, you know, the school buses come here at 3 o'clock and, you know, this is when this happens. So some of that, it comes from feedback, not necessarily personal experience, but once you're aware of something, you know, setting it and I hate to say it, but you got to beat a drum over time, and every opportunity that comes up, you might want to either apply for a grant with Mass DOT or bring it up for the selectmen for capital or a capital improvement committee. But always being a champion for a particular thing. And I don't get married to projects too, just so you know. If it doesn't get funded or found to be, you know, something that the town wants to do, I certainly respect that. But along those lines, in Douglas, we had this road, North Street, that meandered back and forth, had an inordinate amount of traffic that really it should have, for the number of residents that go up there, and it comes down to the center of town. It also has a hairy intersection at one end of it. But that's one of the things that I had been, I don't want to say harping on because that's the wrong term, but championing and was the alignment of North Street and sidewalks for North Street. So I'm happy to learn that as part of some economic development that's been going on over the last 2 years, they're in the process of working with an engineer to widen it and straighten it out, which I think is phenomenal. And I hate to say it, but I don't think it would have gotten that attention if I hadn't been driving it.
Thank you.
So it sounds like you're very calculated when you come up with projects and plan them out. Can you describe a situation where you had a snag that was unexpected and how you dealt with it?
Snag, they always happen. Don't think they don't. In Douglas, we had a $50 million school project that was going on, and that's the town share. It was a $100 million project, and we had one of the roofing contractors had the roof installed, but didn't secure the roof with a seam on a renovation portion of the project. Well, certainly over the weekend, we got a significant amount of rain and it caused millions of dollars of damage. So it was a snafu, but you deal with it. You take these things, whether it's a large snafu like that or a small one, you have to process it and you just take it methodically and you go through it and remain unemotional if you can.
So what did you do?
We talked to the insurance companies. We ended up working with the contractor. There were some things that, you know, we ended up paying for, even though we didn't want to. But the lion's share the contractor was responsible for and their insurance company. But it was a multi-million-dollar claim. So, yeah,
Thank you.
the
So-
schedule was the big thing there.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever, either in Douglas or Spencer, dealt with a intermunicipal agreement?
Yes.
IMA? So we've got, you'll at least have one for sure that we've already signed with Ashland, dealing with water. And we're in the process of possibly executing the second one with Hopkinton. So you'll be required to basically implement those if you're here. So what did you, what IMA are you dealing with? How'd you do it? How did it work out? What was it for?
We have a lot of routine intermunicipal agreements for plowing snow or, you know, working with other towns for, you know, staff utilization. We've actually had staff that we've shared with other towns. Nothing quite like, well, actually, let me take that back. Although I didn't work on it just peripherally, you know, we did have water agreements with other communities. We in Spencer, we were talking to East Brookfield's water district about extending our water lines into East Brookfield. And in Douglas, we worked with Whitensville for the same type of thing. But yeah, I mean, I have experience with intermunicipal agreements. Of course, that happens at the select board level, and I'm happy to provide input to them.
But you would have to, so I'm getting to the fact that you'd have to execute, you'd have to carry out this with your fellow superintendents in other towns. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if you've got experience doing that, because, you know, it says what it says, there may be an issue that would have to be resolved. So I just want to see if you've got experience dealing with your fellow DPW superintendents in other towns.
Yes, yes. I think Westerling's over in Hopkinton.
Not
you know.
alone.
Oh, really? I see. Oh, I saw that position.
It's filled.
Yes,
So, you know, because we've dealt with him on this.
right. Yeah, he's a pretty good guy. And so, I mean, I think that's procedure, frankly. You know, you work out, you look for your best interests and you want to facilitate a good, successful project for everyone. But obviously representing the town for our best interests. Yeah. And I've always worked with my neighboring towns, always.
How big is Spencer population wise?
Just over 10,000,
It's the same sample in Douglas,
just, well, probably closer to 9,000.
the same size, okay,
Yeah.
so very comfortable. Andrew?
This touches on the question that Sam asked earlier about, you know, trying to find ways to carve out your time, to think about kind of longer term things, get new ideas. Could you talk about any, professional organizations or conferences or anything that you've been involved in over the years to help you gather ideas about best practices in the field and things like that?
Sure. So having been members of ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, I'm not going to think of the name, I'm going to draw a blank. MELC, that's the Massachusetts Land Surveyors, yeah. And other organizations, I currently belong to Worcester County Highway. And, you know, I don't belong to AWWA, but I probably should. now that I think about it.
Waterworks.
Yeah, waterworks. But those are all resources, you know, networking and problem solving. Usually you can communicate with your peers on issues. And I'll give you an example. In Spencer, we just started implementing a pre-treatment program with salt brine on the roads. You know, a neighboring community had been doing it, but if you don't communicate with your neighboring communities, you're not going to learn from their mistakes. So we looked at their operation. They came down to talk to our highway department and gave us some hands-on experience that we kind of eliminated a lot of the guesswork out of implementing this kind of treatment program. And, you know, we've only done it for the last 2 storms, but
Mhm.
it really made a difference in terms of the snow not sticking to the roads. And, you know, so I spoke with Chris about that when he was taking me around, but it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, but that's an example.
Thank you.
As DPW superintendent, you'd be part of the senior management team. One of the opportunities there is to work across various departments. Can you give examples of where you've done that successfully to leverage resources in ways that a single department wouldn't be able to do?
Sure. We, in Spencer, we were doing a building envelope study of the library. And so I talked to the fire chief and I said, hey, we could either rent a lift truck, or, you know, is it possible we can use your fire
Ladder truck.
And yeah, he was gracious enough to let us use it, and he brought it over. And, you know, really, again, you know, I've never had an issue with any community I've worked in where, you know, the departments didn't work well together. You might get individuals in departments that may not see eye to eye on things, but if push came to shove, any of the departments unequivocally that I've worked with have always been more than accommodating on projects.
It sounds like a fire department training exercise.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Can I ask one quick one
Of course.
off the map? You mentioned Worcester County Highway. Are you good friends with the MassDOT District 3 people?
Yeah, I know a group of them. Barry Lorian was from Douglas originally.
We are eager to be their good friends.
Yeah. No, yeah.
So I don't really like the rest of my questions, so I'm gonna go off script too. What interested you in applying for Southborough's DPW superintendent position?
Well, the community seems like a very nice community. And, you know, it's a little farther commute for me, but I think I would appreciate a community that's like Southborough. It reminds me of Douglas a lot. Not that I want to go back to Douglas, but I think the role for what I'd be doing here than what I did in Douglas is a little different. So I think it's an opportunity for me, and I didn't want to pass it up.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the commute for a second. You're okay with it? You realize what it is, and it is what it is?
Sure. Yeah. Why do you know something?
No. It's just. Well, I'll tell you this, you know, since COVID, a lot of people work from home, right?
Sure.
And so, I was used to driving to Boston, you know, for 20 years, and, you know, I was fine with commute, but, commuting has become very out of favor at this point, so it's, you won't even hire some people sometimes if you offer them a job in your office, they have to work at home, so I just want to make sure you're okay with the commute.
Oh, yeah. I used to commute to Cambridge from Whitensville.
This is
Yeah.
not that bad.
No, that's when I took Douglas and it was in the commute.
Okay, so let's talk budgets for a second. So you'll have 2 budgets under your purview, the water enterprise fund and then the regular DPW, which is basically everything else, right?
Yep.
How many times in the last few years where you had controlled the budget, have you had to ask for more money before the end of the year, where you actually had something overall that caused a problem. I'm trying to understand, how good you are at budgeting. So did you have anything that blew up on you that you had to ask for?
No, snow and ice is the only one that really you gotta backfill, but, outside of that, I've never had a problem.
The same thing with us. that's
What,
I'm sure.
yeah, what,
Snow and ice.
what I try to do is, not pad a budget, but if I have a capital project, I want to make sure that I don't have to go back before town meeting if there's some kind of change that occurs. So I want to make sure that budget is adequate to cover any kind of unanticipated changes.
You'll have a lot of help with the capital side, so I'm really focused on the operating piece of it, which of course is still mostly salaries.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of things, DPW is complicated, so you have, I think, certainly one of the top three, jobs and complexity as far as this town goes. So, a lot of things that can go wrong as far as the job goes. And you do get pulled quite a bit of different ways. People, call DPW for a whole lot of things, right? So you may have to learn how to say no too.
Sure.
Because it'll be too much. All right, so budgets are, you're fine with those.
I mean, like I say, I think it's fairly easy. You look at the history, you look at what you're doing, what your needs are your needs changing. If your needs are changing, then you research that, add that in as appropriate, and then you move forward. And as long as you can defend and justify your budget, if there's an area that's deficient, I haven't encountered that personally, so it's not been an issue I had to deal with.
Good answer. Okay, so that's my last question. Anybody else have any more questions?
So,
Okay, Chelsea? Okay. Right, so do you feel thoroughly grilled?
No, I think I'm having a conversation, it's mutually.
Good, good, good. So anything else you want to tell us, to wrap up?
No, I think, I look forward to hearing back from you one way or the other, and I hope you find the right person for the position. Because I think, like I say, it's a two-way street. We both want to make sure it's a good match.
Anything else?
No, I think I'm all set. I had the opportunity to meet with Bill, with Mr. Lynch, last week, and I think the way you just put it is conversation. And, and I think that's how you find out if you've got the right person or not. It can't be question and answer. So I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and leave it to the board to decide next steps.
So we will make a decision fairly quickly, so that's about.
Good, okay.
So thank you so much for.
Appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for your time.
Thank
I look
you.
forward to hearing from you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Okay, so we can approach this one of two ways. We've got this on the agenda for tonight's meeting as a backup. If we want to take more time than this afternoon to decide our next step. So I will ask if you want to discuss this and make a decision today as far as whether you want to go forward or not, or do you want to think about it over dinner and come back and.
I'm ready.
Okay,
All right.
okay, so Andrew, you want to start as far as thoughts, opinions?
Well, our job description, the qualifications we're looking for were a professional engineer and someone that would have a skill set that fit our department. And I think that Mr. Cundiff has experience in each of the departments that we're looking for. I thought it was interesting to hear how he manages duties in Douglas and Spencer. It sounds like the way that they structure those positions is a little different than the way we have it here. And I think it comes with a good mix of, over 20 years of experience in municipal positions, but also private sector experience as well. Sounds like he'd be strong in project management and managing a budget, so I would be prepared to support his appointment.
Sonia?
I agree with Andrew. I think that for me, as folks have known, I think the engineering background is a strong point. And even though you may not be doing the actual engineering day to day, I think it's critical to have someone who actually could do it if they had to oversee external consultants, et cetera, to make sure that you send them in the right direction and you keep an eye on how things are going from a technical standpoint. And Mr. Pender certainly seems to have that skill. I think his breadth of experience, again, is important and one of the strongest candidates we've seen in this process for that, which I think also is important. So, and he seems to have a fairly relaxed temperament, which I think is also very important. That you get a lot of pressure in this job, and it's difficult if you get too excited about things. So that's a plus for me as well. So I'm prepared to offer the job.
Chelsea?
Okay, I really liked him. I think that he brings, I think he'll be easy to work with. I think, you know, like you said earlier with the team, we have a lot of great employees at DPW, and I think that he would get along really well with them. We have a lot of great department heads in town. I think he would mesh well with them as well. I think that he would be able to manage our vendors and keep them honest, which I think is important given some of the projects that we have coming up. I think he has a wide variety of experience, which is what we've been looking for. So I think he's a great candidate. I think he'll fit in well. I think the fact that he can bring a project to a border committee and get shot down and not take it personally is good. And then come back the next year and try again. I think he'll work well with advisory and capital. So I think he's a great fit.
So I ditto what all three of you said this one, but I disagree with what you said. What I was trying to get to with my question about the first day, whatever, as we know, we've got a very capable DPW who have carried on heroically after Kierman. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we haven't missed a beat. Look what has been done with the tree process, with what Chris Leory's done, the updates. And therefore, I want someone who can come in and appreciate what they're inheriting, right? And realize that, you know, this group of employees have had the same manager for a long, long time, and they're used to that person's ways, and everybody's different. So I think he appreciates that, you know, he's not gonna come charging in like a bull. He's gonna kind of get the lay of the land and understand how best to work with the group that he's going to inherit. So he seems so mature, so relaxed. You know, you can see him talking to anyone. You can see him, you know, he and the chiefs fit right in together with Mark, et cetera, with Greg and schools. I mean, he may have some even input into what goes on with our big school project. You know? So I don't have anything negative at all. I think that he is the whole package. Okay, anything else before we? Okay, so, Mr. Lynch, would you like to make a comment?
Not after hearing all of you speak. You know, I couldn't agree more. I think he's, you know, we got 15 candidates. We narrowed it down to, I think it was 5 that we brought forward. And he was by far the best fit for what you're looking for. He has a wealth of experience, an outstanding temperament, and the reference checks we did, you know, pretty much echoed everything that you said and everything that we thought when we interviewed him 2 times incorporated into you. So great. I'm thrilled to hear that you feel the same way.
So good job.
Thank you.
Mr. Lynch, good job, good job. We did the right thing. Ms. Malinowski, stand for us on that path, and Ms. Malinowski made sure we did it very efficiently. Okay, so I will make a motion to pending a successful contract negotiation and pending the appropriate background checks to appoint Mr. Kunda to the position of DPW supervisor.
Second.
Superintendent. Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? 4-0. Okay, now, I would suggest that we just pick up where we left off before with asking Andrew and Chelsea to
Our contracting team.
I think you probably
How
can.
did that work out?
No, I'm not saying, no. Anyway, you've done a lot of work, so I would think that what you've done will not be wasted, is my point, that you can, take advantage of the work you've done before, right? And I hope we can do this fairly quickly.
And I, if I may, not to interrupt, but anything I can do to help along those lines,
Okay,
feel free to reach out and have to
thank you.
contribute whatever I can.
No, we really appreciate it. So this is definitely was the right process that we went through, so we so appreciate it, got to know you, and, hopefully we'll work with you again in the future, so.
I'm hoping.
Who seconded the motion?
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. So, 4-0.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all we got. So tonight, when we get to it, we will just, so what I'll do is I'll just update, what we did today, as far as where we stood, and,
Good.
okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think I can get dinner now. So, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? See you guys at 6:30.